All right. Um, this is our presentation. I'm John. This is Luke. Mark. Luke, tell us how your text relates to women's rights.
Well, the text that I read was The Story of an Hour, and it relates to women's rights because it portrays a woman who experiences freedom from her husband when she thinks that he's dead, but he's not actually dead. But for like an hour or so, she thinks that she's free. This, so henceforth, this portrays that the main idea is that the oppressed may not realize what they do not have until they experience like what they're missing. So she experienced not being like oppressed by her husband, so she experienced freedom.
What would you say the goals were of your guys' reformers that you read about?
I read Ain't I Woman for my first text by Sojourner Truth. And Sojourner Truth was a freed slave that at the time when she gave the speech was giving it to a women's convention in Akron, Ohio in 1851. And I'd say her goals was to get equality not just for women, but also equality for African Americans. Because in her opening paragraph of her speech, she says, I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women of the North all talking about rights, the white men will be in a fix pretty soon, which is pretty powerful, and I think means that in terms of equality, the black people in the South and the women in the North were both kind of at a minority because the South was very plantation based and like slave based, and the North was more about landowning men who, and neither of those parties had any rights at the time.
What about you, Lucas?
Well, the other story that I read about giving women the vote, pretty much the goal of this was to free women from political slavery or to give them more just political freedom overall by allowing them to vote, which opened up more freedoms for women in society.
So I read about the Brown versus the Board of Education, and kind of one main idea of that was fighting the war for equality, not outside and actually fighting, but fighting in the courtroom for your rights. And one big way they did this was using a lot of specific reasoning, especially in the case. Reading through it, like they go back to the 14th Amendment a lot. That's a big deal. And one main point they kind of kept reiterating was not allowing children solely because of race deprives them of having good education, even if the facility they use is equal to those to the white schools. Because even if the facilities are the same, that doesn't mean they're getting the same quality of teachers, the same quality of education.
For my second text, I wrote or read the Declaration of Sentiments by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and this was about a woman who was fighting for women's rights and the right to vote. And she says in her second paragraph that we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. And what she did here is she took the Declaration of Independence and kind of, it says in the original declaration that all men are created equal, and she adds the women to give, to kind of change it into including everyone, not just men, but also women. And she then goes on later in her public document or speech and uses a kind of speech where she says, like, he has done this to her, and an example of that is where in paragraph 5 she says, he has withheld from her rights which are given to the most ignorant and degraded men, both the natives and foreigners, which she's basically saying that men give rights to natives and foreigners who are sometimes not most deserving of the rights, and they never give women the rights, which is really powerful.
Why do you think why do they want to achieve these goals from the people you're reading about?
Well, I think because at the time of this speech, women were starting to become more independent a little bit. They were starting to do more of their own things, and they thought, why can't we vote? Why are men so great if we can do most of the same things that men can do, which is pretty true.
All right, what about you, Lucas? What's your reform?
Well,
why do they want to
one specific story, The Story of an Hour, the goal might be to show that women can be free. They don't have to like have their husbands to like be happy they can be free and be independent and still have the same rights and still be experience the same like happiness that men might.
Yeah, and I think with mine, kind of one reason they wanted to achieve these goals is so that they could make a big step for racial equality in our country. Just in the I think the classroom. I might have brought this up in class. It was kind of more of a, it was kind of a broader. It was kind of helping out the broader picture, and the racial equality in the classroom definitely helped that. And I also read the Brown versus the Board of Education. If it was a failure. And I don't think it was, but I think there's two sides to the story, because the black community, as you read on, certainly felt the negative repercussions of the desegregation. There were a lot of jobs lost, there were a lot of schools closed, but I still think it was not, because I think aside from it just being a very powerful struggle and making a stand, it raised a lot of awareness for racial equality in America.
Yeah, I think to sum it up, kind of like from the time of these speeches were made to now, there's been a lot of improvement in rights for everybody. Like women's rights has gotten a lot better now. Women are now the breadwinners in households and all that, and black people are what I think equal now, and everything has just gotten a lot better, but there's still problems that need to be solved.
All right, that's all we got. Thank you.